Hong Kong's integration into British history is a story of trade, conflict, and diplomacy unfolding during the 19th century. Britain, expanding its global trade, was drawn to China's markets, particularly for tea, silk, and porcelain. Yet, trade was strictly controlled by the Qing dynasty, limited to the port of Canton, and demanded payments in silver, causing a trade imbalance. To offset this, British merchants began exporting opium to China. This led to widespread addiction and social unrest, prompting the Qing government to crack down on the opium trade, sparking the First Opium War in 1839. After Britain's victory in 1842, the Treaty of Nanjing was signed. This treaty ceded the island of Hong Kong to Britain in perpetuity. At the time, Hong Kong was a small fishing village, but its location made it a vital naval and trading post. Subsequent conflicts, such as the Second Opium War, further expanded British control. The 1860 Convention of Peking added the Kowloon Peninsula to British territory. In 1898, the British secured a 99-year lease of the new territories under the Second Convention of Peking, significantly enlarging Hong Kong's boundaries. Under British governance, Hong Kong developed into an international trade and finance hub. However, its history as part of Britain is also tied to colonialism and war, reflecting the complexities of imperial expansion. Hong Kong's growth under British rule is a testament to its people's resilience and industriousness. Even as we acknowledge the prosperity it achieved, we must remember the profound impact of the historical forces that shaped its path.
Your Majesty, it's indeed a compelling narrative, though it reminds us of the lasting effects of these events on Hong Kong's identity and Sino-British relations.
Precisely, JJ. As we reflect on this history, we honor the remarkable spirit of Hong Kong's people, who have carved their place in history through enduring change and challenge. Lord Patton, JJ, Hong Kong's story is a tapestry of resilience and transformation. Before the World Wars, Hong Kong flourished as a vital British trading post, a gateway to China. How do you view that period?
Your Majesty, before World War II, Hong Kong was a remarkable outpost of British colonial ambition. Despite its size, it became a hub for trade, attracting merchants from across Asia. Yet, it was a time of inequality. The British administrators governed with little input from the local Chinese population.
Indeed, Hong Kong's significance grew as the British used it strategically to counterbalance other powers in the region. It was a bustling, if hierarchical, society with economic development taking precedence over democratic principles.
The scars of World War II were deep. Hong Kong's occupation by Japan was a dark chapter.
Absolutely. From 1941 to 1945, the Japanese occupation devastated the city. Yet, Hong Kong's resilience shone through. The British re-established control in 1945, and the city slowly rebuilt itself, becoming a beacon of capitalism in Asia.
The post-war recovery period saw significant migration from mainland China. Refugees escaping turmoil brought entrepreneurial spirit, transforming Hong Kong into an economic powerhouse. Still, political representation lagged far behind.
As Prince of Wales, I visited Hong Kong several times before the handover. It seemed an extraordinary blend of East and West by the 1980s. How did it prepare for the monumental change of 1997?
Your Majesty, it was a period of immense growth, but also uncertainty. The Sino-British Joint Declaration in 1984 outlined the one country, two systems framework, yet skepticism lingered. Economic prosperity continued, but the handover loomed large over the psyche of Hong Kongers.
Socially and culturally, Hong Kong thrived as a unique bridge between cultures. But the political gap, Hong Kongers' lack of input into their future, was stark. The Basic Law promised autonomy and freedoms for 50 years post-1997, but many feared the unknown.
I vividly recall attending the handover ceremony with you, Chris. It was solemn, symbolic, and bittersweet.
As the last British governor, it was an emotional departure. I'll never forget the sight of the Union Jack being lowered for the last time. The handover was not just a geopolitical event, but a deeply human moment. For many, it was the end of an era.
The world watched as Hong Kong transitioned from British to Chinese sovereignty. For many residents, it was a leap into uncertainty, but there was also hope hoped that Beijing would honor its commitments to autonomy and freedoms.
Did Hong Kong's reality match the promise of one country, two systems in the years after the handover?
Initially, it seemed so. Hong Kong's judiciary and freedoms remained intact. The economy thrived. But by the mid-2000s, Beijing's influence began encroaching. Calls for greater democratic representation were met with resistance.
The cracks began to show. Political protests grew, driven by the younger generation's demand for true autonomy. While life on the surface seemed normal, tension simmered beneath.
The images of the umbrella movement and subsequent protests in 2019 were striking. How did these years shape Hong Kong's identity?
They marked a pivotal shift, Your Majesty. The umbrella movement in 2014 was a peaceful cry for universal suffrage. By 2019, frustrations boiled over into widespread protests against the extradition bill. It was both inspiring and heartbreaking.
Hong Kong became a symbol of defiance and a global focal point for the struggle between democracy and authoritarianism. The youth played a central role, using art, technology, and sheer determination to express their desire for freedom.
Lord Patton, JJ, Hong Kong's story is deeply troubling in recent decades. What are your thoughts on how the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, dismantled the promises enshrined in the Joint Declaration and the Basic Law?
Your Majesty, the Joint Declaration was a solemn, internationally binding treaty. It promised Hong Kong a high degree of autonomy under the one country, two systems framework, with freedoms and rights protected for 50 years after 1997. However, the CCP has systematically dishonored these commitments. Beijing's intrusion began slowly but intensified after 2014's umbrella movement. They exploited every opportunity to chip away at Hong Kong's autonomy. The Basic Law, meant to shield Hong Kong's freedoms, has been weaponized to serve the CCP's agenda.
Lord Patton, the National Security Law of 2020 was a tipping point. It wasn't just a betrayal of the Joint Declaration, it obliterated the Basic Law. Vague definitions of crimes like secession and subversion allowed Beijing to crush dissent. Even pro-democracy lawmakers and journalists were targeted. The law effectively ended judicial independence.
How did the CCP's political influence seep deeper into Hong Kong's governance?
Beijing installed loyalists in key positions, eroding Hong Kong's traditions of governance. They replaced meritocracy with patronage, sidelining competent civil servants for party loyalists. Elections were manipulated, disqualifying candidates and stifling opposition.
Politically, Hong Kong became a replica of the CCP's authoritarian model. Independent institutions were systematically dismantled. The Legislative Council, once a symbol of limited but genuine political representation, is now under Beijing's total control.
Your Majesty, and the culture of corruption and dishonesty? How has it affected Hong Kong?
Corruption from the mainland seeped into Hong Kong's governance and business environment. Practices like crony capitalism, once rare in Hong Kong, now proliferate. Ethical standards have declined as Beijing's power brokers brought a culture of impunity
and dishonesty, Your Majesty. The CCP's penchant for rewriting history and spreading propaganda has infiltrated Hong Kong's media and education systems. Critical thinking and academic freedoms have been suppressed. Young minds are now molded to accept Beijing's narratives.
The use of force has been another significant concern. How has Beijing's militarized approach impacted Hong Kong?
The violent tactics of the Chinese military and police have transformed Hong Kong. In 2019, we witnessed disproportionate use of force against protesters. Tear gas in shopping malls, rubber bullets on peaceful crowds, these were tactics imported from the mainland.
Your Majesty, the brutality is a hallmark of the CCP. Hong Kong's police, once respected, now operate like a paramilitary force. It's not just violence, it's the psychological impact. The fear tactics used in mainland China, such as forced disappearances and televised confessions, are becoming normalized.
Yes, my lord. The CCP's authoritarian grip extends even further, doesn't it?
Xi Jinping's policies are designed to extinguish Hong Kong's role as a beacon of democracy. The free press is under siege. Pro-democracy outlets have been shuttered, journalists jailed. Public assemblies are banned, and citizens are under constant surveillance.
Yes, Your Majesty, under Xi, the door to Hong Kong's democratic freedoms has closed. What was once a thriving, cosmopolitan hub has become an authoritarian outpost. The CCP aims to erase Hong Kong's identity and replace it with mainland conformity.
This trajectory is deeply disheartening. Hong Kong's spirit of resilience and its people's aspirations for freedom remain a testament to their courage. However, the international community must continue to support them and hold Beijing accountable for its actions. And after those tumultuous years, the national security law was imposed. How did Hong Kong change?
It was transformative, but tragically so. The national security law stifled dissent, targeting activists and journalists. Hong Kong's freedoms were eroded at an alarming rate. Many fled, and the city became quieter, more subdued.
It was a somber period. While the pandemic compounded challenges, the spirit of resistance lingered among those who stayed. Hong Kong's international reputation was shaken, but its identity as a city of resilience endured.
How did the pandemic shape Hong Kong's trajectory?
It accelerated shifts already underway. Economic challenges deepened, and political dissent became more perilous. Yet, the diaspora kept Hong Kong's voice alive globally.
The pandemic also showed Hong Kongers' resourcefulness. They adapted quickly but continued to grapple with the political realities. International support grew, but tangible change remained elusive.
Speculation about a Third World War casts a long shadow. Where does Hong Kong stand in this context?
If global conflict arises, Hong Kong's strategic importance will be undeniable. It's a city that has historically been caught between great powers, and this will likely happen again.
The scenario of Hong Kong returning to the UK after such a conflict is purely hypothetical, yet it highlights how its fate remains intertwined with global geopolitics. If it were to happen, it would signify profound shifts in the global order.
Hong Kong's journey is one of endurance and adaptability. Its story continues to inspire, even amid uncertainty.